Okay, everyone, raise of hands. Who would rather talk about real football or who would rather talk about paying players? Yeah, I agree. I also agree that two of my heads in the same shot is a scary thing. So let's do something about that as well. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for stopping by for the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. All right. Yes, I would rather talk football. And actually, the planned show for tonight, which is usually the Big Ten Live show spot, was since we reviewed the Big Ten all time rankings last night. Check it out Thursday night. So, to not be confused, we released videos the previous week in which we ran through the all time rankings, program rankings for all the schools in each conference. And then we provided you all with the opportunity to leave your comments or questions. And of course, call me directly and discuss the all time program rankings. We concluded with the Big Ten on Thursday night. Tonight was reserved to do the national look and to go through all of the various conferences. That was what our spot tonight was reserved for. However, the NCAA and the five conferences and the legalities of all that's involved changed it up on us. And let's discuss the important matters at hand. Okay. We produced a video released a couple hours ago outlining the news that so the five conferences and the NCAA, so they have agreed to terms in regards to paying players. Let's just put it out there quite simply. Pay players, or let's be accurate about this. As it states in the article, the right, the opportunity for the schools to choose whether to play the players. So, of course, as long as the players still have the option of where to go to school and play football, then the individual schools can certainly, as I understand it, the individual schools could say, we are not necessarily taking part in this, which is roughly going to be up to $20 million of revenue, in which it's reported a few weeks ago, $17 to $22 million, which represents about 22% of the revenue for the Power Five. And it's still officially a Power Five, with the Pac 12 still officially the Pac 12 in name only, Washington State, Oregon State. But there is a conference still that still got a vote in this. So let's say said school determines that they aren't going to participate. Well, I am just thinking out loud, and this is not something I'm prepared to talk about, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. And then we'll run through a lot of other notes and take your comments and questions. And of course, please call me at the Voice of College Football right here. The link's in the chat. Would love to hear from you. That's why we're here, because I've already produced the video with my analysis, my take, my perspective, my questions about how this is going to roll out going forward, which is supposed to be starting in the school year of 2025-2026 for us college football fans, the fall of 2025. So that 2025 season, those of you who are pro sports fans, and many of you are to the degree that whether it's because you are interested in this information or you are such a fan that you just know everything, you know the salary figures of your favorite players, right? NFL players, Major League players, NBA players. I don't know any of that information now. There was a time in my life when I knew many of the players. Okay, this dude makes $3.8 million a year. This guy makes $5.5 million a year. This guy makes $900,000 a year, etc. Don't know anybody's contract now. But you guys are going to be able to do the same thing. Oh, joy, oh, bliss. You are going to be able to go through the same exercise with college football players, college basketball players. I would think to a much lesser degree, but still college basketball players. Women's college basketball players, that would certainly be fine. And I will cover that end of it. Some baseball players. And is that going to be the end of it? Maybe. I would guess that would be about where it would stop. College football players, men's college basketball players, women's college basketball players, some SEC baseball players, and some Big 12 baseball players, maybe. I don't know. ACC baseball players, maybe. So again, appreciate you stopping by. The Amazon link is in the description section of all the videos. So please grab the Amazon link, join us there. Reason you do that? So here's tonight's analogy. This is why you use the Amazon link. If I pointed out someone along the side of the road, there was a particular place in Ohio that I would pass all the time over the last couple of years. Every day, somebody there every day, often the same person, often two or three. Sometimes it switched out. Maybe they were on shifts. I don't know. But anyway, I shouldn't say that because I did certainly give them money many times. And that's not the way I shouldn't say that, but the reason. But so let's say we could guarantee that is going to be put to good use. That money given to those particular people, I was going to say gentlemen, could be ladies. I always see gentlemen on the side of the road. That's going to be put to good use. They are going to put that to good use toward nourishing food or whatever they need. Okay. And you know what? You don't need to supply the money. We're going to give you the money to give to them. How about that? But you'll get the credit and we'll give you the $100 to give to them. And it's for a good cause. It's for legitimate needs. I would think that everyone here would do it. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos because it doesn't really cost you. Well, it doesn't cost you a penny and it doesn't mess up your Amazon account or do anything like that. Guaranteed. And if you're the one out of a million or the first one that this will ever happen to, please let me know. So thanks for doing that. All right, back to this. Because I hesitate in laying out the point that I started to, but that's the way it read in the article about the option. The word option was not used, but it was not a complete mandate the way it was stated or expectation of a particular school to participate in this. So I guess it would determine on flat out if they are part of the college football universe that is making that level of money. Probably answered my own question there. The MAC, we'll take the MAC for example, based on the latest college football playoff agreement starting this season going forward, we know that the group of 5 was to receive, I believe the number was about 1.2% of the college football playoff revenue. And that had to be divided among the 5 conferences. And then it depended on, let's say, the American Conference was able to supply most of the college football playoff participants. Then they would get a unequal share in their favor. And so who knows what this figure is going to be. If the Big Ten and the SEC are receiving $21 million in playoff money starting next season, $21 million per school, and that's 58%, well, do some math. What's 1% versus 58%? If the 58% is 21 million, it's not much. I don't know what the math is. I guess if it was If it was 1/10, if it was 5.8%, it would be 2 million. So it's about six or 800,000. It's about 6 to 800,000 per school. But let's say you're on the low end of the group of five. Let's say it becomes about $300,000 or $400,000 that's going to be handed to every school in the MAC based on college football playoff participation. And then those schools may actually operate in the red when it comes to the rest of their operating budget. Because, yes, they've got a contract with ESPN. The MAC has a contract with ESPN. They broadcast the Tuesday and Wednesday MAC action. I think it's called MACtion. Let's get that right. MACtion on Tuesday and Wednesday night. I don't know what that contract is. That money, that figure has to be out there somewhere. When the big conference is signed, we talk about the dollar amount. So it's got to be out there somewhere, but it can't be much. So I'm curious about these lesser FBS schools. I am interested there. And then if the course of college football takes on the direction that many expect, shoot, forget about the MAC teams of the world. It's going to be see ya to the Wake Forest and the Boston Colleges of the world, and they will no longer be a participant in this. And that it's a debate, and it's been a debate here. Will that increase the revenue per team, per school for everyone else? Because, well, we just got rid of the stragglers on the side that nobody watches. And so we can slice the pie in a bigger way for each of us. Or are there going to be some college football fans disenfranchised out there? And is there going to be lesser of an audience? And will that affect TV revenue going forward? But back to the paying of players. I should have ran a poll. And I would put it in the chat right now if I knew how to do that. But I don't know how to put a poll in the chat. But I would simply ask you, are you for paying the players? That would be a simple ask right there. We could start right there. Are you for paying the players? I don't think it's great for college football, but I am for paying the players. They're creating a product. They have for a long time. They are of age. Shoot. If you're 12 years old and you're able to get a job as they did in the old days, down at the factory or down at the local market, they got paid. So I think the first $40,000 or $50,000 of that component is called a scholarship, whatever that is for that particular university. That should not be discounted. And with that statement, and I want to underline that, emphasize that, boldface that, put it in caps, because I hear way too many people discard the value of a scholarship for these football players and say, yeah, well, they need to get real pay. Well, if you've ever paid for your own college tuition or a loved one's, then you know those are very valuable, or they're at least supposed to be very valuable. They take a lot of money out of your pocket. Let's put it that way. All right, let's go to the phone lines. We got our guy Adam on the line. Adam, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, how's it going?
I am doing well. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I just had a brief question for you. So a lot of the issues with NIL have been well documented, so I'm not going to go through those. But my question for you is, what about the idea of the NCAA having a college football draft, kind of like the NFL and Major League Baseball? We already rate high school players from 1 to 5 stars. We take the top 50 teams, and the lowest teams get the first picks. You know what I'm talking about. I'm just wondering if you think that might be a way to increase parity and fairness in college football and reduce this kind of competitive race to pay the most to get the best player.
I've brought it up many times, and I love the idea. And maybe I don't want it to come from a place of trying to show an 18-year-old what the real world is like. But
Right.
at the same time, look at the NFL. The NFL is a corporation that most people don't look at it like this, but they have an office in Buffalo, they got an office in Jacksonville, they got an office here and an office there. Basically, you have decided to get hired by that company, and then you get sent to your office and you
Right.
get sent to your location, and that's where you work.
Right.
And now we're going to pay college football players. However, they're still going to have, although what was stated by the Notre Dame president within the article that I read today was they're going to try to walk this fine line of we're going to pay them, but they're not going to be officially employees. I don't know how
Right.
they're going to get around that, but I understand that in terms of NIL. But we're now talking about outside of NIL taking the revenue share from TV and gate, and you're paying them. You're running a business, but then you're not truly running a business. I guess you've made a bunch of businesses have made an agreement because they're in competition against each other what to do with revenue. But yes, it's a very odd place still where this is. But I like where you're going, except I like it from the standpoint again that would be just a lesson to say, hey, this is what the work world is like, and this is what you've signed up for, and this is what you want. And yes, you're going to be paid. However, I really don't want to take away the student athlete component away from all of this
Sure.
because the majority of these players are not going to play in the NFL. They're not going to school to play football. Well, you've got the guys that are going to school to play football and they're going on to the NFL. It's almost certain, or, they've got a great shot. And then you got guys that know they're not going to the NFL, but hey, this is a great opportunity. It's a scholarship. And hey, now I can make NIL and all this. You've got a huge bucket of players that have dreams and hopes of going to the NFL, and they've got some kind of shot to go to the NFL.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was just wondering, since players can transfer after a year, my thinking is that a college football draft would incentivize teams, of course, to enter into contracts with their players, paying them a lot more money than, say, somebody who was drafted in the second or third round. Do you think that it might actually disincentivize some players from even wanting to go to the NFL because they're going to make all their money in college? And is that maybe a good thing?
For the player who, wow, that's a great question, because there are football players out there that don't like football.
Right.
They're just really good at it, and they see it as a means to an end. So if they really don't like it and don't like the risk of the injury, don't like the contact, and that's probably what they don't like about it more than anything. They think, okay, I can be in college for 4 years and I can make whatever, 150, 800,000, whatever the number is. And I have other skills and abilities that I can parlay, or just connections.
Yeah.
That I can parlay into a career and a business, and then I can invest this money. I can grow it. And yeah, I don't want to play in the NFL.
Yeah. And I also think ultimately a draft, I think, would bring more parity and more fairness than we have now. And I hope that happens in the future, because I'm kind of worried about the state of college football right now. But thanks for taking my question. As always good talking to you.
Thanks, Adam.
Great show. Thanks a lot.
I appreciate you being here.
Likewise. Thanks.
Adam brings up some great points. So I've made that comment many times myself, ever since we started down this road of pay for play. What would it look like if we truly turned college football into professional football? We're jumping from schools that are autonomous, but they are connected through a conference, and therefore they abide by conference rules and agreements there. We jump that model to putting all the conferences under an umbrella and a governing body, a commissioner, and they operate that way. And there's a draft. Because one of the components of this pay for play is, wow, to determine what these players are worth. So it said in the article on ESPN today that there is a group of, I hope it's not one individual. If it is, boy, he's got a big responsibility, and he must be one smart guy. I hope it's a group of people. Anyway, that usually works out better for a number of reasons. One can be bought or skew it in one way or the other. But a sports economist who is determining what this NIL pay, back pay, retroactive pay will look like and be distributed to about 10,000 athletes over the last, they call it, keep saying 10 years, but they say 2016. Maybe they think 2016 through the 25 season. I don't know. 24, 25 is the current year we will be in going into next sports calendar, school calendar. So regardless, 2016, 10,000 athletes going to be paid somewhere from 2.7 to 3.3 billion dollars. There's a sports economist. Man, can we hire this guy at the Voice of College Football, bring him on once a week, the conversation with him, the sports economist? I'm kind of I am the rookie amateur sports economist of sorts, and many of you are much higher on that chain than I am. It's not something I won't start down that road. I was going to talk about my own personal life in regards to finances, so I can handle them reasonably well. Yes. Made a bad investment this week, but have made other good ones. So that's the way it goes. So, yeah, this sports economist determining who gets what. Okay. Man, he's going to have some kind of metric system. You think my all-time rankings metrics were complicated with about 15 categories and point system trying to determine, okay, who was worth more money, Bryce Young or CJ Stroud? Oh, I guess they're going to be equal. I don't know. Are they? Well, Bryce Young won a Heisman. He played in a national championship game. I guess we'll give him more. I don't know. That's on the high end, of course. I went to the very highest tier. This guy was a guard at Wisconsin for 4 seasons. He started 3 games. He played in 23 others. What's he worth versus the tight end on the same team who caught 18 career passes? Wow. That's quite the ordeal of trying to determine this NIL. And that's not even what we're talking about. That's this NIL settlement that came down this week that the Big 12 signed off on. The AC signed off on it. And that's a different deal. That NIL $3 billion over here is different than the pay for play model going forward. I don't know if there's any interconnectedness between them, but as of the last time I looked at it, and I don't want to misspeak here, the Big 12 and the ACC signed off on that NIL situation, but the Big 10 and the SEC had not signed off. But again, I don't want to spew misinformation here. So we don't need to get into particulars about that. But this is the Pete Thamel article from, what is today, May 23rd? No, it must be May 24th because this was May 23rd at 8 p.m. Okay. This is the Pete Thamel article from last night. This is a different article than the one that I reviewed in the video today. I'm sure most of it's an overlap. I just wanted to get that clarified because I got to admit, I don't think I'm confused, but there could be some confusing points, and maybe I am, concerning the 2.7 to 3 billion that is being paid, and that's NIL, completely NIL related, as I have read and have understood, versus the initiative to go forward with pay for play. Because otherwise, there's no knowledge. There's no way to determine. There's no way to estimate. Well, I'm sure there's a reasonable way to do it, but technically, there's no way to estimate NIL contributions going forward. That's an unlimited amount of money. Unlimited amount of money. Man, did I see something about the national debt today that was crazy? What was the figure? If I got this straight, that if you spent $1 million every day from the time Jesus Christ walked the earth, $1 million a day up until today, you would have not spent the national debt. Was it 1 million a day? It couldn't have been 1 billion a day. Could it? Could it? That'd be 365 million a year for 2,000 plus years. All right, do the math. Anyway, it was astronomical. Again, put it into perspective on the national debt. All right, let's go back to college football's debt, because a lot of schools are going to have to try to figure out where they're going to come up with this money. Not talking about Georgia, not talking about Clemson. Well, maybe with the ACC, I am talking about Clemson. I sometimes when we spit out the elites, we speak in football terms. No, in this case, in all money matters, the elites are in the Big Ten and the SEC. So financially, think about this. This plays with your thinking right here and kind of hit me for a first time. When we talk about the elites of college football, well, for the last 10 years, it's been Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, even though they're knocked down here the last couple of seasons. Over the last, let's say, 10 seasons, I'm talking, follow me here, the elites of college football, right? Florida State was an elite last year. But the elites financially, and for those college administrators and the chancellors, the presidents running the schools, they probably care more about being elite financially. That sounds like a good video explaining, and you all know this. You all know this. I don't need to explain to you. You don't need to watch the video. But explaining to some people, and I got to come up with a catchy title and thumbnail. Indiana elite, Clemson not elite. Financially, Indiana elite, Vanderbilt elite, Rutgers elite, Clemson no, Florida State no, Miami no. It's not that much of a list that you can really pick off in terms of impressive football programs. How many impressive football programs are left outside of the Big Ten and the SEC? I think basically impressive, sure, that word can be used in any such way. But as I think of successful programs, really successful, Clemson successful, Florida State successful, Utah successful. I think that's it. Kansas State, they're successful for them. Oklahoma State, successful for them. Are they successful? I saw some knucklehead who put out a tier system of college football today, and I'll get back to this money business. Oh, I got to find this. Maybe I'll be giving too much promotion, but that's okay. I'll be giving too much promotion to said person here. Maybe we're just going to pick on Iowa a little bit here. And this is no affront, no offense to Iowa. This has nothing to do with you. You didn't do this, but just one of your knucklehead fans. Let's see. Somebody sent this to me. Otherwise, you guys have to send me things on Twitter because I try not to follow knuckleheads. So I'm not, unless Twitter, they trick me from time to time. Twitter will trick me and default me back to that for you setting, and I keep putting it back to just following. Is this true? Not that I care about this, but now I see that this is connected to EA Sports. Tier rankings. I don't know what CLC is up top. Huh? Tier rankings. Tier 1. Okay. I get it. Oklahoma State. What? Huh? Like tier rankings, like right this second, right now, or all time, or whatever. It doesn't matter. Either one. Oklahoma State? Iowa? What are we doing here? And Penn State in the tier 1 means it's a pretty thick tier. It's pretty deep tier. But Penn State, you could belong depending on the criteria. But Oklahoma State and Iowa, in no way, if we are ranking Oklahoma State and Iowa, and I understand I know nothing about these EA Sports games and NCAA 25s coming out in July and all that business. But this is just, I don't know what the, yeah, I commented. You see that? So that just struck me. I don't know. Oh, this is, wait a minute. Is this coming from, so EA Sports is paying college. Okay. So this is coming from here. EA Sports is paying colleges for college football 25 based on a tier system using AP poll finishes the past 10 years. Really? And Oklahoma State, the bottom of this cannot be listed in order. That might be in order. Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson. I got the rankings pretty well locked and loaded in my brain, and I don't know how they came up with that business. 2014 through 2023. That's Washington made it to 2 playoffs, also a Rose Bowl and a Fiesta Bowl. So 4 of their 10 years, they played elite level. So going back to this On3, even though I shouldn't care about this, I just thought many of you would. EA Sports is paying colleges. Oh, they're paying the colleges? They're paying the individual players that amount of money. Is paying colleges for college football 25 based on a tier system using AP poll finishes from the past 10 years. 99,000, 59,000, 39, and 9,000, practically 10,000 for tier 4. Okay. Well, that's chump change in terms of paying a particular college, unless we're talking about individual players again. Okay. Maybe somebody's got some thoughts there. You can grab the link in the chat. And again, we will get back to the matter at hand. I got derailed there. My apologies. I saw shiny objects and I went after them. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. I have one dear friend who gets on the phone with his entire family. His wife's a maniac in terms of, I say that in a loving and good way. I mean, that's a great thing about telling people about the Amazon link. So shout out to them. They know who they are if they're listening. And yes. So the Amazon link's in the description section of all the videos. All right. We've got an Aura link in the description section of all the videos as well. And if you understand security theft, I went through that. And it's not fun, and it's not a secure place to be. Doesn't feel secure, certainly. Feels very odd and very strange, and you don't know if somebody's going to pull money out of your bank account or your stock account or whatever they're going to do, or screw around with your identity. So, Aura link, 14-day free trial. And I can vouch for these people because I used them for a long, long time. And again, national all-time rankings. I don't know when we're going to move that show to. That could be a ways away. We wanted to put a big cap on our all-time program rankings by throwing all the numbers together and doing the national show. Don't know when we're going to have time to do that. If things go well tomorrow in my world, maybe we go live on Saturday night. Maybe. So we've got a big question with player distribution. How are you going to pay these players? We know how you're going to pay them in terms of the money's flowing in. It's coming in. So that's not the problem. It's, as Adam brought up, how do you pay freshmen? How do you pay the freshmen? And it was indicated in the article, go back to the video I posted a couple hours ago. It was indicated in the ESPN article that freshmen will be paid on some kind of, and again, I don't want to get this confused with the settlement that went out to the 10,000 players from the last 10 years, or will be, because that also mentioned the same thing. Although I would think that that's all in the past. That would deal directly with performance on the field. But freshman football players coming into college football, what do you pay them? I think you should pay them all the same. Pay for performance. That is how everyone else, it appears, is going to be paid, is that there's going to be a performance factor involved. And again, wow, we could start a whole new channel talking about rating players and trying to connect the dollars. And we could take real life dollars because we have the figures, trying to build out a whole system and give a dollar value to every player in college football, which I guess On3's got to be working on that right now because they already have the NIL value, which I understand isn't that accurate, or it's, who knows? I don't know anything about it. I just have seen it assigned to various players. But we could start a channel here, The Voice of College Football. If any of you budding economists, sports economists, you got to be a sports economist, though. Of course, you got to be a sports economist. But man, you've got the college football knowledge. If you're an economist, we'll get you started on the channel. We will build. You can be the commentator, and we will just. That's like that's an endless job right there. By the time you figure it all out for one season, we're rolling into the next season. I like it. The voice of college football got to come up with something catchy. The channel names are oh so catchy. Nebraska, Iowa, Florida State, Miami. We'd come up with a catchy one for this one. College football green, college football cash, college football cold cash. Yeah, we should get on that. How do you pay these players? That's going to be difficult, and it's going to cause, at some point, somewhere, resentment. But how you pay these freshmen, it better not be on recruiting rankings. Then that is going to cause us all to cast a doubtful eye on recruiting rankings and what could be then affecting them. Could they be even more so in doubt in terms of the legitimacy or the cause of these recruiting rankings? And let's not get into that. This should be a meritocracy. We don't pay based on potential. Everybody makes the same their freshman year. And then you determine some kind of bonus system. You have a flat fee for every player. Every player makes at least $40,000, and then it works up from there. If a player gets hurt the first play of the season, if you have determined Riley Leonard's pay for his next football season, probably bad example, this may be his last season in college, but let's say we spin ahead to 2025. We have determined Julian Sayen's pay for 2025, and God forbid he gets hurt the first play of the season. Well, I'm not looking to take away money from guys, but then he is no longer the performer that he was anticipated to be. He should be given the flat rate baseline figure. And what I really hope is going to happen, but it's not, is that revenue that is generated and being paid to the players, that would be a tremendous relief to these schools. And am I looking out for the schools? No. A tremendous relief eventually, ultimately, if the money is organized and funneled in the right direction, and that when we involve academia and the government is always in question. But you may be taking some tax burden off the taxpayer for those particular states. If you say, okay, we have figured out all the finances and the baseline pay for every player in college football is going to be $40,000 in 2025. And then it works up from there based on accomplishments and whatever we bake into the system to determine the value of these players. However, an education at Indiana's worth this, and Purdue's worth that, and Vanderbilt's worth that, and on and on and on. That should be the starting pay, right? That should be the beginning of it right now. Take that tax burden, or somebody should probably call in who knows so much more about it than I do, because I don't. But I might be speaking out of line, but I've got to think that eventually this goes back to the taxpayer. And that pay should start with a scholarship. And whatever that player earns beyond that, based on the revenue of the sport, I am happy for them. I am happy for them. So if that player's worth $100,000 and his scholarship's worth 40, well, his scholarship's first worth 40, and he'll get his payments that'll total $60,000. But I got to think that the way, again, academia and government work is, it's not going to work that way. But again, to wrap that all up about player pay, I was trying to work in player pay and per player pay, and it all came out just a bunch of P's. That's a mess. That's a mess. I don't care how many economists you have. It's football. It's not basketball. It's not baseball. Those sports are much different. Why? Sure, they have different positions, but all the positions do the same thing. Hockey, all the positions basically do the same thing except goalie, and I know nothing about hockey. But I do know basketball, and I do especially know baseball. I know the games, and every player hits, fields, throws. Every player in basketball shoots, passes, rebounds. So you can quantify their statistics. And the statistics aren't everything. Absolutely not. But it's a large portion of the way those games are played. They can be quantified statistically in a valid way. Football, much less so. I think the quarterback stats are the most valid. Of course, offensive line has a huge issue. They're huge part in that, and so does the wide receiver core. We know that. All right, so that's payer. I did it again. That's player pay. Pay per player. I've got nothing else on that. Just, it's a mess. Before we get to another aspect I wanted to hit on here, and the link is somewhere there in the chat. I'll pull it up here and we will drop it back in the chat. I know it gets lost, and I apologize. I did not put it in the description section of the video. John just left it there, though. Thank you for that, John. So we've got a Big Ten live show. This is the time slot for it every Friday night. So we appreciate you being here. It's been preempted of sorts, and I justified it to a certain extent by saying, well, we did the Big Ten rankings on Thursday night. So there's the Big Ten live show for this week. We wanted to hit on this, believe that it's that important. We are starting the week after next, going to start an SEC show. Mark, you've done an SEC show. We have. We're going to do it again. So we're going to have an SEC show. Mark, why don't you do a Big 12 show or an ACC show? Would love to. Maybe we will. We'll see how the Big 10 and the SEC do. I do have plans for those two shows starting in July. We'll announce those a little bit later. We'll get to those a little bit later. And before we hit on the next aspect, and that was the distribution of the money to the schools and the football programs themselves. That's what I really want to hit on. We got to Real MVP here. Hey, man.
Hey, Mark. How you doing this evening?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I mean, Mark, on a scale of 1 to 10, this to me was absolutely a 0 and surprising. Were you as not surprised as this as I was?
Oh, I'm right there with you. Sure.
Right. Do you know why they cut it off at 2016? Because I feel like if it was illegal in 2016, it should have been illegal in 2015, 14, and 13 not to pay the players.
Yes. And so if that money is tied to, if my recall from reading that article earlier today, that's a money obviously the money. It's a TV figure. Did you see that? Do you know for sure? That's slipping my mind whether that's more of an NIL merchandise thing, sports games videos, or a TV figure.
I'm not sure which. To be honest, Mark, I'm not like a lawyer or anything like that. I mean, there's plenty of them on YouTube who claim to be internet lawyers, so you can contact one of many of them. I'm not one of them, though, so I don't know.
The only reason I bring that up is because I don't know, unless there's some kind of statute that prohibits us from going back before that, because we actually just saw a very famous case with a brutal beating of a celebrity, and that deal I'm not going to go into, but because that apparently happened, I think in 2016, they dismissed it. So anyway, maybe there's some kind of 10-year statute, but that was not 10 years ago. But anyway, 10 years because if it's television connected, we should be paying these dudes like that are 75 years old now. They're playing on television and somebody was making money.
Exactly my point. Exactly where I was going to go with this. And do you think they're going to create like a something like the NFL has, to where once you graduate from college, there'll be like a supplemental program, like a pension program for the players that graduate? Could you see that forthcoming in the future?
Oh, I could. Sure. Anytime there's money to this volume, then people that are smart know how to grow that money. So yes, it could be put away and it can be invested and it can grow and it can be of benefit to people down the road. Now, of course, this is not something that college football has initiated. They've been forced to do it. So I doubt if they're going to initiate this. This is going to have to be another player uprising, or somebody's going to have to get in somebody's ear to kick college football a little bit and say, okay, this is the next opportunity of what to do with this money, I would think.
I mean, I would think so too, Mark. I mean, the first time the NCAA does something proactive will be the first time it ever happens. So,
yes. Yeah,
so
their whole governing body, as you well know, what they're best known for and what we typically talk about is obviously their investigations and their conclusions and the penalties and everything. But that always comes from some kind of leak or some kind of turning in of a rival that they just follow up on.
Right. And something else I'm curious about the pay-per-play thing is the Jada Rashada lawsuit. What do you think about that whole mess of him basically being super greedy and just going out for the money and ending up with no money and just a bad reputation?
Well, is he super greedy?
I would consider it greedy. If I got $9 million for sure and somebody else offers $13 million, that's questionable. And I go for it and take away the $9 million guaranteed money, because we knew Miami had the money, but Florida clearly didn't have the money, but he didn't care about that. So to me, that's greed.
Yeah, I guess it's greed. I think it's more mixed with a foolish decision, more so than greed. Yes, if you can secure a job for $80,000 that's guaranteed, but then one comes through that's at 120 or whatever dollar figures you want to put on it, that's not, or if there's a stock investment that is nothing's guaranteed, but some kind of annuity or something that's almost guaranteed at 5%, but you want to throw your money at the stock that is promised 150% jump in 3 months or whatever it is, then you take that risk. So he took that risk and he got burned, and we'll find out if he eventually truly got burned or whether he was able to recover from it with this ruling.
Well, how do you think it's going to impact the game at large? Because it seems like a bunch of people are just making a bunch of promises they can't hold up. And if this guy gets found for fraud, do you think that'll curb the NIL situation somewhat?
Well, I sure hope so. I would think, though, that is always a deterrent for any criminal activity, is that the criminals are not seeing where they are prospering left and right and seeing an open industry in which they can take advantage of, and they see others like them being held accountable, and that coming to a very brutal conclusion of being held accountable and damaging and ruining your life for a time being. That's always a deterrent. I am not discounting your greed comment at all. I am not at all, because I actually agree with you. I guess I was just trying to point out that we all could act in greedy ways in smaller doses in life, because we're weighing the risk, or we're enticed by the possibility, and therefore sometimes make a foolish decision over a wise decision because of greed. And it's easy when you don't have $9 million or $13 million to call that person greedy. There can be all sorts of people in all sorts of places in this world that could look at our lifestyles and call us greedy. So it's relative. What I think is also, though, in play here is is that these players are going to have a guarantee of being paid starting next fall in 2025. Now, that's soon for a lot of people, to your original point, is going to prove not to be enough. It's not going to be enough, and they're going to be looking for shady NIL deals, and that's going to continue to foster itself. Shoot, you're an NBA fan, and we know ESPN produced a documentary that was well done, I don't know, 10 years ago, that shows it was about all of sports, but it seems to be even more difficult, more frequent problem in the NBA, where these players receive ridiculous sums of money and they can't handle it and they blow it, and then they have no job skills, they have no nothing, and they don't have any money, and they're broke.
Right. And that's going to be a large concern going forward for these college players, because
Yes.
unlike what people believe, it's easy to spend a lot of money very quickly.
Yes, and it's easy when you come from nothing or from little means, or even if you come from a decent upbringing financially, is all we're talking about here. When you're not responsible for the bills, when you've just lived and your mom and dad have taken care of everything, to not know what things cost and how much, $50,000 may sound like the world to some of these guys. And whatever these salaries are going to look like, there's going to be a lot of players that either overestimate, they already do this, overestimate their NFL qualifications and their odds of getting to the league, or they're going to overestimate just having money in their hands and what that is, what that means, and just that it's always going to show up. I'm thinking of a Major League Baseball player from maybe 10 years ago who kind of learned the hard way, and then he had a really good recovery kind of story where he was able to, and it sounds ridiculous, but if you're used to living on a $15 million salary and you don't prepare yourself for the future, and then suddenly you're playing and you're making $2 million a year the last stretch of years of your career, that sounds ridiculous, but you can get into trouble. And these players might make $75,000 a year. Again, I'm just throwing out numbers that might be low, and think that they've got, the world in their hand, and be thinking they're going to be in the NFL anyway. And so I can blow the $75,000 a year that I'm making now. But then that doesn't pan out, and they're on the street, and they don't take advantage of their college education. They don't take it seriously, so they learn no skills. And yeah, I hope I'm wrong, but we're going to have tons of those type of cases out there. Shoot, before the NFL cooperated with college football, as you well know, and determined, okay, we're going to give some direction to these college players to let them know, these early entries, what their draft grade looks like. That there were way too many players over evaluating themselves and thinking that they were going to be high draft picks, and that got undrafted or were selected in low rounds. And that draft grade, that information, education curbed that to a large degree.
Right. And I saw some pushback in the chat from what I said about greed. The thing about the greed is if you can make X amount one place and go to the other place for more money, that's not greed in itself. The thing is when you don't do your due diligence and research to make sure this person can actually pay you the amount of money, then that's greed. And that's what Jada Rashada seems to have done here.
Yeah, I thought you outlined that very well. And I also thought that for anybody who plays the stock market, that there's all sorts of bad decisions made in the stock market based on greed, based on fear, based on greed, aside from just having either good advice or having the technical expertise to make the right selections. Beyond that, people panic or people are greedy. They made a nice bit of money. They should be happy with their return. Nope. They're going to hang on, and it's not good enough. And yeah.
Yeah, and then they lose it all, as it always goes. You know, Icarus flew too close to the sun, and he got burned, and he crashed down with nothing.
Yeah.
That's a tale as old as time. So the final thing I'll ask you, Mark, is for all these small school fans out there, you know, your App States, your Boise States, it was already really difficult to compete, but now with this additional revenue, it just feels that much harder for them because if you're an elite player, you're going to get guaranteed income going to a Power 5 school. So what do you feel about for the small fans out there, the small school fans out there, how they should be taking this?
Well, I alluded to this to a certain extent. I didn't fully explain where I was headed, but I alluded to this to a certain extent. It all depends on the structure of college football going forward. What is going to win out? You know, we see this upheaval that you love to bring up with the Clemson, Florida State, of course, that they're leaving the ACC. But regardless, we know it's changing. And the basic forecast, so there's a million forecasts. There's people like me out there all over the place making predictions about the way this is going to land. I've certainly thrown out ideas. I didn't call them predictions. Just, hey, we've got these indicators. It could go this way. We've got these indicators. It could go this way. This is how I would structure it. But the prevailing thought is that there are 30 to 40 schools that earn their keep, and the rest of them, see ya. Well, suddenly their value in the marketplace has gone down immensely because they're no longer connected to the big boys. They're no longer connected to, I like to think of it this way, just talking about viewing habits or looking at viewing habits of your average college football fan. And if you're a Texas Tech fan and that's your priority is to watch Texas Tech play, but you're a big college football fan, so you watch maybe the best Big 12 game, but sometimes that's just not that appealing. So you feel part of the national scene. You're maybe a little delusional about your team ever competing for a playoff spot, but you truly just believe, hey, we're part of this. But if you get cut off, your days of having any interest in watching unless you just love college football and you'll watch anyone play, but in terms of your hurt feelings, resentment, and being cut off from the Alabama LSU game and the Penn State Michigan game and these games, right now you feel a connection, even though it may be a stretch and it may not be warranted and all of that. You technically are in that same stratosphere. But if you're going to get cut off, then I don't know what kind of finances they're going to operate under. I don't know how the ESPNs and Foxes of the world are going to treat those schools going forward, because they have contracts with these conferences, the Big 10, the Big 12, the SEC, the ACC. They have, and if the Boston colleges and Wake Forest get kicked out of those conferences and they're consolidated, then their money, their revenue line has been shut down. Now, are they still going to find a place on television? Yes, but they are receiving, as you well know, right now, they're receiving an exorbitant cut for what they're contributing. And they'll no longer be in that place.
Right, and they're not going to be in that place going forward for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, so they're not going to have revenue they're not going to have this $20 million per team to spend.
Right, and some people are seeing this $20 million per team as like a hard salary cap. I'm not viewing it that way.
No.
Is it a hard salary cap, or is it just an add-on to NIL?
Add-on.
Okay, so in the grand scheme of things, your Texas A&Ms and stuff like that's still going to be able to get the best players because of NIL.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, we still have NIL. And now it doesn't have to be this veiled thing where we have this reputation for this great NIL program and join us and so forth and so on. It's all that we've suspected about it and have known what was going on with most. So let me back up a little bit. You've had your schools that have been, I'm not saying that they don't have a ton of money and that they aren't working the back channels and all of that, but they're a little bit straighter arrows when it comes to this in terms of the NIL. And we saw them move a little slower. Maybe a Michigan, maybe some other schools. Again, they're still working on it. They're still going hard at it. And I'm not talking about today. I'm talking about a year, 2 years earlier, because they were trying to figure out what is all this. And we want to somewhat play by the rules, and we want to look good, and we want to show that, we do things the right way. Well, now all those inducement issues, all those guidelines against inducement, enticement, all of that, those no longer exist. You can do all those things. So yes, those schools are going to have a huge advantage because they can just let it all roll for these high school kids and say, yeah, we got this enormous NIL program and we're now free to above board work with our collectives to show you all that we have and all you have opportunity to gain.
Right, and some people in those slower to get to NIL schools think this can somewhat close the gap. What do you think about that?
Well, anytime you can guarantee a certain amount of money, that closes the gap. That anytime you have a lot of times, what companies most want is a guarantee on what their expenditures are going to be and what their guarantees of revenue, and that's what we have here. That's why they sign long-term deals and say for the next 7 years, we have this coming from CBS, and this is from Fox, and this is from everyone in the college football playoff world, and this is what we're going to get. So we have a core base of revenue that we can guarantee that we know is going to be there, and then the rest of it's gravy. Whether we want to raise ticket prices or we think we can make more money through merchandise or whatever, or we're really going to hit up our NIL partners even more, then that's gravy. Or maybe with Texas A&M, it's not gravy, and other schools like that.
Right. Final thing I'll ask you, Mark, is what conference is Florida State in?
Florida State, as of Friday, May 23rd, is a member of the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Okay, and they're going to be playing football this year in the ACC, right?
They will be.
I'm just making sure.
Each day that goes by actually improves the possibility, maybe now probability, that they will be doing such in 2025 as well.
Right. So, and I'm seeing Kansas rumors. Mark, what conference is Kansas going to be playing in?
They're in the Big 12.
Okay, and they're not going to the SEC?
Kansas in the SEC. Maybe if Greg Sankey suddenly was just really wanted some more basketball championships. I don't know what the angle on that is. I don't know what market they're going for or what the deal is there. I've heard that too.
Right. And Duke is not going to the Big Ten, right?
Not in the foreseeable future. If they get North Carolina, I think that there could be a running mate there. And whether NC State wins that out or Duke, I don't know.
But that's not going to happen this year.
No. Of course not.
No. So all these people making videos about how this team's going to this conference and this team's going to this conference and that team's going to that conference. You're telling me all this is just clickbait, Mark?
Well, it's like throwing darts, or it might not even be like throwing darts, because at least if we were throwing darts and had a dartboard, we'd have some semblance of a target that was reasonable. But I guess they're throwing, I don't know, stones in the ocean or something like that. Yeah, if we could take all these people, and when I say all these people, I don't even have anyone in mind because I don't watch, but and reverse time 3 years and go through all their predictions, projections, whatever, 98% of them, and I might be a little low, are incorrect. Yeah, but if you just keep spitting, you're going to be right at some point. Like they say about a clock, a broken clock twice a day.
I got you. And the final one I'll throw out there is Washington State and Oregon State's not going to the Big 12 this year, are they?
Ooh, no, they're not.
I'm just making sure because these are all videos I've actually come across that it's going to, it's definitely happening, Mark. It is definitely going to be happening.
Well, if I ever developed a mean bone in my body, maybe I could go on a rampage and I could be plucking videos off the internet and making fun of them. I don't know. We're not going to go down that route, though.
Mark, you may be a gentleman, but I would enjoy that. Okay, I don't have the dignity enough to say I wouldn't greatly enjoy that and making fun of these people that are doing these clickbait stuff. I mean, this has got to stop somewhere.
Well, that's not.
It is just clickbait. It's not happening.
That doesn't irk me as much as other stuff that I see that really annoys me. That really annoys me. Just people that spew out garbage. And I started every so often to pull up stuff on Twitter and say, come on, I just railed on this person. They don't know what they're talking about. Look at this ridiculous list, or look at what they're promoting and say, this is completely false and inaccurate. Yeah, you I'm sure have other interests in life and dance around YouTube a little bit outside of the sports realm. And you have people that are, we'll even start within the sports realm, who produce videos where basically they just want to tear apart what Stephen A. Smith or Colin Cowherd said. So they'll sit here and they'll basically just play a 5-minute clip of what Colin Cowherd or Stephen A. Smith said. And they'll either be like, they're an idiot, they're stupid, and they'll have little to add to it, or they'll just shake their head and agree and say yes, and they'll do rather well. Now, in the entertainment and political industry, they obviously get far more clicks of just basically, Bill Maher said X, Y, and Z on The View, and therefore somebody like me on my YouTube channel would sit and just play that. And I'm providing no service to anyone because you can just click on that. Although I have issues now finding the actual original clip that I just want to watch, I got to sit and watch somebody who's just sitting there like me, but they're just watching this clip and then they just nod their head over and over and just stop it every so often to say that was really stupid, or they add nothing to it, but they have these successful YouTube channels. So I would be the college football version of that to a certain extent. Although what you're suggesting might actually be a little bit more legitimate, because I would be actually pointing out absurdities out there.
Right. I think, Mark, as just a viewer, people hate Mark, and people like negativity. And I'm not going to lie, I like that. I like when people get dunked on. And Mark, you and with your facts and knowledge can go look at these YouTube channels talking about Gonzaga going to the Big 12 and all this other ridiculousness, foolishness, and just tear it apart. Every year, every conference gets realigned. Every year. It's crazy.
I hear you. And all sorts of things are running through my mind about things that I come across all the time. And again, I take a lot of that vitriol out on Twitter, and it's not making me $1. So maybe I need to bring that here more often. I get into a lot of fights on Twitter with a lot of knuckleheads that don't know what they're talking about and just spew a bunch of false information constantly.
Right. Listen, that's everywhere, Mark. That is everywhere.
Yes, it is. I go back to what Rick Riley, the great Sports Illustrated writer, said a long time ago, and this is kind of at the outset of not the internet, but people doing what they do now, having these platforms. And he said, the great thing about the internet is everybody's got an opinion. But the horrible thing, the detestable thing about the internet is everybody has an opinion. So
anyway, Mark, that's all I got for you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, DeReal. Appreciate it. Because I think we go down another path here that to me is the most important path to you as a football fan of your team. So the most important path in all of this, I believe, is revenue distribution to these schools. I think it's just become apparent because the dollar figures and these contracts with these large media companies have been in the news so much with all this realignment in recent years, and with the Big Ten's deal and them separating from ESPN and ABC and solely going to Fox, and then of course CBS and NBC with the new contract. And we see the figures now. And so it's hit a lot of people recently that, Indiana, their athletic program, and let's face it, well, basketball's big at Indiana, so they may not be the best of examples, but from a TV standpoint, their football program makes more money than Clemson's football program. Yeah, they do. Well, now we've got a situation where, Clemson and Florida State are fighting against that. First, they took it out on the ACC. They've taken them to court. That's what they're entrenched in right now on two different fronts. But now, if you have to pay the players, and that's going to be part of that competition for players, then, fill in the blank of the elite you want to go with. Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, we know what the list is. It's pretty short. Let's start with those. Are you okay with now competing? Especially if you didn't cultivate your NIL program quite as well as you could have I got to think that Clemson's NIL program is probably, and I might be completely wrong, but it only makes sense that it would be one of the smaller functioning collectives in college football because they picked up 0 transfers. And when I say 0, I mean 1 or 2 in 3 years, 4 years. That doesn't mean that NIL collectives are only serving transfer portal players. You know, they obviously are in play for high school players and for the players currently on the roster, the veteran players. However, of course, it's most readily needed to go out and get transfer players, and Clemson's not done that. So I have to think that the elites are not going to be okay with everyone getting the same amount of money to pay these players. I just can't. I just don't see it. They've been okay with it for so long. And I don't know at what point somebody scratched their head in a location like Columbus, Ohio, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Austin, Texas, and was like, this might have happened in the 1980s, and thought, we're sharing money with who? With who? With Northwestern. We're sharing money with Vanderbilt. They get the same cut as we do. We just played in a string of, back in this day, Rose Bowls and Orange Bowls and Sugar Bowls, and they got just as much money as we did? Huh? I'm sure that the school had their expenses paid for the trip and all of that. But then after that, at least in the Big Ten, I know that each conference was a little bit different. They switched it up a little bit. There was a time, and I can't explain this to a T, although I ran across this information probably 6 months ago. It didn't stay with me specifically, but the general theme is that USC made more money than anyone in the Pac-12 during Pete Carroll's days. But that ended at some point in that tenure, thanks to the defunct Pac-12 commissioner, Larry Scott, who was a horrible commissioner. And he played with a good functioning thing. And the Pac-12, oh my word, we could do, and I would think that ESPN would do a documentary on the demise of the Pac-12 at some point. There should be a 30 for 30 there, because there should be a Pac-12 conference right now. It wasn't about that they just had nobody watching them and couldn't survive and they fell apart because everybody ignored them. Sure, a lot of us ignored Pac-12 football for a time. Yeah, it's had better days, but that wasn't it. It was mismanagement solely. But one of the concepts that did in the Pac-12 was, and this was right out of Larry Scott's mouth a number of times, 10, 12 years ago, is we are going to push and promote and show everyone that the Olympic sports is what made the Pac-12 and are just as important as football. Well, you're living in fantasy land. And maybe Larry Scott doesn't like football, or I would hope, my hope is that at least Larry Scott was acting out of some type of honest place where maybe he just didn't like football. But that's not his job as commissioner, is to go on his whims and his wants and desires. But at least it was some kind of honest initiative. If he truly was brain dead as a businessman enough to think that the Pac-12 was going to stake its claim on swimming championships and volleyball championships, that they somehow produce the same amount of money, then I'm at a loss as to how somebody like that gets a job as the commissioner of a Power 5 conference. But that's what they did. And they poured resources and time and promotion into promoting themselves as, hey, the Conference of Champions, that was true. And I don't have an issue with that being promoted because it actually, I got to think just about everyone here remembered that, just like the SEC slogan, just means more. And I'm about to lose my monitor here in just a second. Bear with me. So where did all that start? Revenue distribution. I got to think that's going to get addressed. And there's going to be some type of Major League Baseball kind of model. It's not the NFL where there's not that many more people watching the Cincinnati Bengals, or they're a bad example. They'd be on the low end, I would think. But, everybody watches everyone. And yes, the Houston-Jacksonville game on Thursday night gets far less eyeballs than the Dallas-New York Giants game on Sunday afternoon. Of course, but the popularity is so astronomical, and even the lowly rated games are at such a premium, but everyone's drawing. You could put on whatever NFL games at 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock every Sunday afternoon, and people just flip on the NFL. So you don't have that disparity of brand names and draws to the television that you do in college football. There's not much of a difference. Again, I know the Cowboys are popular and the Steelers and whomever else. Yes. But that's why they have a national. The NFL has not, their great place in American sports as ruler of all American sports. And I know I irk some college football fans when I start down this road, but it's just flat out the truth. The NFL dominates the American sports scene unlike any sport has ever dominated the American sports scene, probably ever. Certainly during the era of media, going back to the 1950s of mass media. We'd have to go back to the days of newspapers and radio, where my thought would be baseball dominated. But horse racing and boxing, it's funny because if you go that far back in American sports, you'll read that horse racing and boxing were enormous, and of course baseball was, and they were the three most popular sports, probably going into the 40s, into the 50s, and then the NFL kicked in. But in college football. But paying these schools, I just have to think that they're going to come up with a model that's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be 50-50, but for a simple explanation, we'll go with 50-50. You take 50% of the revenue and you say, we split this evenly. Then you take the other 50% and you say, we're looking at last year's and historic TV ratings because these schools bring in the most revenue. And Northwestern, Rutgers, just be happy to be here. Just be happy that you survived, that we did not kick you to the curb. But maybe they would. Maybe they did. Maybe they're gone already. I don't want to live in that college football world where Northwestern and Rutgers and Wake Forest and Boston College get kicked to the curb, but that may happen. But I would have to think that, let's say we're talking about $100 million a year, just as a round figure. Okay. Out of that 50 million? No, let's say $1 billion. Let's just take a round billion. Out of that billion, okay, the Big Ten splits it up 18 ways. Or it takes the 500 million, splits it up 18 ways. Takes the other 500 million, then they do the research and they say, Ohio State, you get the most. Michigan, you get almost as much. on down the line. And Michigan fans, I slightly did that just to irritate you. But yes, Ohio State is a slightly better ratings draw. Regardless, whoever it is, we know who the teams are. And Northwestern, if the per team distribution of money was reflective of the TV ratings and how much these schools actually bring to the conference, and we will just stick to the Big Ten here, and let's say it's an average of 80 million with the new contract going forward. I see numbers. People spit out numbers all the time, and they're all over the place. I've heard as low as like 65 million. I've heard pushing 100 million, and maybe those 100 million figures were per school included playoff revenue, which is going to be 21 million per school. So regardless, we'll just stick to 80 million per school in the Big Ten. It's not like, if those were truly reflective of the TV popularity and the ratings reflection of those schools, I get this idea that people out there think that Ohio State and Michigan would go to 100 million and Penn State would be at 85 million and and maybe Northwestern and Rutgers and Illinois would get knocked down to 50 or 55 million. No. If it's 80 million per team, that's our figure, and they distributed that money based on who's bringing in the revenue. What's the entire pie? 80 million times 18. That's a tough figure. That's 800 million. It's about 1.5 billion. Okay. Say it's 1.5 billion. I would say 90%. 90% of that would go to Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, USC, Oregon, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Washington. So who do we have left? Rutgers, Maryland, Michigan State if they're good. Anyway, you get the idea. And Ohio State and Michigan, if it's a 1/18th, which is what is that? Is that 1/18th is like 6%? No, they're getting 15 or 20%. And Penn State's getting 10 or 12%. And USC's getting 10 or 12%. Thank you, Troy V. Pulled through for me with the exact figure there, 1.44 billion, if the 80 million figure is correct. Now, I know that the Fox deal, yeah, I might be off on my figures in regards to whatever the Fox, CBS, NBC deals, I think all came in at right about a billion, a little over $1 billion per year. So that's, you do the math, it's like 1.1 billion. So I'm a little high on the 80 million. It's probably more like 70, low 70, 72, 73 million. And then the 21 million per school for the playoff revenue. All right, folks. Let's see. Student athletes. That was my next note. I wanted to get to student athletes. Man, there's some really good polls I could be asking all of you, because my next one would be, do you care? Do you care if these athletes go to class, take tests, pass tests, write papers legitimately? Do you care? Do you care? Tell me in the chat. Do you care if players go to class and participate honestly and in a effective way, in a true way. Ralph does. Antoine could care less. Dave does. Nick, yes. Moose does not care. So again, I think I'm going to go to Twitter and I'm going to go here. And so be looking out for that poll, because I'd like to ask that poll and about revenue distribution per team, whether you think it should be equally distributed or whether it should be based on the popularity of the school and how much they're bringing in. Because this is college football. If I want to watch professional football, I'll watch professional football on Sunday. It's far better. It's a better product, better players. It's far better. If you know anything about football, and if you've watched football, you can tell a big difference between watching college football on Saturday and watching the NFL on Sunday. How many quarterbacks do we see on Saturday? Well, we don't see anybody like Aaron Rodgers in his prime. Obviously, not. We didn't even see Aaron Rodgers in his prime when we saw him at a Cal. Like, that level of quarterback play is. Now, these guys are getting really good. CJ Stroud level play out there. Yes. But still. So my point is, if we're going to turn it into professional football, then why not just watch professional football? Now, my buddy TJ Konerski on the Michigan show, we talked about that a couple weeks ago, and I brought that up to him. He said, what many of you were saying, I don't care. Don't care if they go to class. Don't care. I said, what is your attachment then to this Michigan football team? Just guys that wear a maize and blue jersey. Is that it? So let's understand, there are always going to be guys that are going to go to class and take advantage of their scholarship, and they're going to be legitimate students. So don't worry don't think, I hope you're not worrying about any of this, but don't think that we're going to arrive in a world of college football where everybody's a mercenary and they're just showing up to campus for practice. They don't even go to school, none of them, and they're just a hired team. No, it's never going to arrive at that, for the one simple fact. If there were as many college football teams as there were NFL teams, and it was a immediate perfect transition from point A to point B, then that would be a concern, because then they'd all be future NFL players. When I say all of them, I mean in the 90 percentile, because you're still going to have your Boise State players and your MAC players that are going to be NFL players. So there are going to be really smart guys. And when I say smart, I mean IQ, but I also mean just wise, that have a brain in their head, that know, I want to take advantage of this situation top to bottom. So I'm a football player, and sure, I believe I'm an NFL player, and I have legitimate reason to believe that. However, I'm going to learn something and get a legitimate degree. So you are still going to have those guys, but you're going to have tons of guys that know, I'm not going to the NFL. I need to take advantage of this. I'm going to class. I'm a student. That's how I'm going to approach this. So that's not going to go away. But still, do you want the thought that 15 or 20 out of your top 25 players are basically hired hands that ignore class, don't show up, don't take tests, don't do anything? Do you care? I care. And I don't have any connection to these schools whatsoever. I did not graduate from a football power, so I don't care from that standpoint. I would just like the legitimacy of the student athlete to remain to some degree. And for as much as that's a joke because of money being handed under the table and classes that are checked off as being attended and all the things that have been done to cheat throughout history, most of these guys do go to class and do legitimately take tests and do homework and write papers. Most of them do. Yes, the backup, the fourth cornerback on the Stanford, well, Stanford's in the bad example, Mark. Stanford's a different deal. On the TCU football team is probably a pretty legit student. So I want to keep it that way. And yes, I'm not ignorant to the point that I think that that's going to exist in every case and that there's going to be no underhanded deals and situations that are going to be taken care of. Of course, that's going to happen. That happened in 1950. Sure, there were all sorts of players who, once this became a business, even before it became much of a business, just guys wanting to win, coaches who wanted to win and build reputations would get guys into school, I'm sure, and then be like, yeah, I know you are dumber than a box of rocks. We're going to figure it out and we'll get you passed so you'll be eligible on Saturday. So the Notre Dame president thinks that this can be pulled off while keeping these players technically as student athletes and not employees. What about Title IX? Now, I think this is clear cut that if the particular program, whether that's a football program, a women's basketball program, and we know from what we just witnessed this past year, 2 years in women's college basketball, and I know this from absorbing the information that's out there. I don't know that from watching the games because I still have yet to see one basket from any women's college basketball player since the last time I was paid to watch a women's college basketball game. That aside, if the program's making money after expenses, I hope that's taken into consideration in light of the taxpayers and other operations within the university and within the athletic program that are drained because of paying for athletics. In most of these situations, most of these programs, if we took every program in every sport in every school and put them all together, 90% of them lose money. But the ones that make money make a whole lot of money. So we know what happened with the Iowa women's basketball team this past year. They made a lot of money. All of women's college basketball made a lot of money. The women's championship game outrated the men's for the first time in history. We'll see if that becomes a trend. That would be historic. I can't think of any, aside from a random time when a Serena Williams would be on the court, that a women's sport was more popular than a analogous attached related men's sport. Basketball, tennis, there's only a few examples, golf, soccer. But I just want fairness. I don't care what the gender distribution is, just so it's fair. Just so it is fair. So I hope Title IX does not get in the way of that. I don't believe it will, but in this day and age and with what we see in our country now, I won't put it past anyone to enact some inane, absurd, ridiculous, corrupt rule that we're going to be paying a number of female athletes a certain amount of money just because they're females, even though their sports didn't make any money. That would be stupid. That would be corrupt. That would be wrong. That would be all those things. It could happen. As I understand it, Title IX is all about participation, equal participation. Fine. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's been taken to some kind of weird extremes where programs have had to be cut or just artificial programs added just for the sake of adding a women's field hockey team or whatever. So that has occurred and nobody wanted to play. But, anytime there's a positive in terms of legislation or a positive, we see this, I could go on a rampage in our society about initiatives that started off in a positive vein that were for good, that were for positive, good, righteous change, right change that turned the other way. All right. John has introduced me to somebody I've never heard of here. Livy Dunn. Don't know who that is. So Antoine, I get your point here. Title IX is an entitlement program. If you have a good product, you should survive on your own merit, not get propped up. Okay. Maybe I'm not getting your point here. I certainly am capable of reading, so I think I got the point, but it could be taken a number of ways, so I don't want to misconstrue it. But you could have the best women's gymnastics program in America and not be able to pay for it. So that's not about not having a good product. That means women's gymnastics is not popular enough. And that might not be accurate, what I'm saying. I'm just using that as an example. Because I know SEC gymnastics is pretty popular, but I don't know how they're generating money. I'm sure they are coming up with ways. Point being, you could do something at an excellent level. Shoot, there are exceptional, world-class, elite gymnastics programs, swimming programs, volleyball programs that make far less or make nothing or operate in the red versus horrible, terrible football programs. But I get your point. It should all be merit-based. Capitalism should work. It does work. There do need to be guardrails. And we are talking about education here. So this is not a business. It's becoming a business in the college football world and in the revenue sports, wherever they touch men's college basketball, women's to a certain extent, and maybe a few baseball programs, maybe softball now. Those games are getting really good ratings figures on TV relative to what they were years ago. And that's become a big deal. Women's college, women's softball. So I get your point, Antoine. But again, this is still an educational academic process. I just don't think that there's a reason to start programs for no reason, just to meet a quota. We should be smarter than that. And the people involved should be more honest than that. to determine, okay, we've got 10 men's programs and we've got 8 women's programs, but this is a fair and just situation because, first of all, there's no equivalent to football. There's no women's equivalent to football. Now, I understand there's women's football leagues out there. I'm talking about college football. There's no women's equivalent. Baseball, softball, basketball, hockey. I guess there's one for just about everything else, I guess. Is there women's wrestling out there? I'm not aware. Women's wrestling? Like college wrestling? So if people are smart in doing their jobs and the law allows it, and it should, there should be reason brought to those kind of decisions. There should be. Well, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Thanks for jumping on board on a Friday night in May. So the next time we see you is probably going to be June. You're not going to see me a ton next week. Got some family visiting, and we'll enjoy the time there. But you'll see me. Hey, at least my family and the members of my family, they don't need to be doing things at 9 o'clock in the morning. So if I can knock out a video, I will. We will do those sorts of things. We will have our full array of shows next week here at the Voice of College Football. Also, again, I announced this earlier, we're going to launch an SEC show. I don't know exactly what time and what day, but we're going to do that on Monday. I believe the date is June 3rd, an SEC show. A lot of great guests. All the just complete benefits and superlatives that you expect from every show here at the Voice of College Football, you can apply to the SEC show. And when we get to July, there'll be a big announcement with the SEC show and the Big Ten show. And ACC and Big 12, we have not forgotten about you. We would not do that. However, I'm one guy. I can only do so much. So we have to make decisions in life. And for a long, long time, we had ACC and Big 12 shows. Look them up. Do a little Google search on the front page here. Just put in Big 12. What did we call it? Big 12 Countdown. Countdown? That doesn't sound quite right, but I think it was. Now I'm going to look that up. We actually had an SEC property. I talked to my buddy David Waters from Gators Breakdown, Mike Laval, who was on Last Word in College Football, my guy Chad. Oh man, it's been a long time. I can't even think of Chad's name, who got out of sports. But the four of us, man, we were working hard. We were brainstorming to put together an SEC powerhouse, but didn't quite happen. Chad Niepling. Chad, if you're watching, I'll never forget you. I did forget your last name for about 30 seconds. But those are all great guys to this day. All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Support all the team channels. Support right here. We're going to continue to drive toward 100,000 subs. And yes, we will be here for all of you. Let's see. We've got Tim and Matt standing by. They should be rolling right about now. Tim, Matt, the USC call-in show over on the USC channel. Don't miss it. Check in with Tim and Matt right now. Just head on over there. You know what? See what they got going right this second. Let's do it. I'm guessing that they're not quite on. I think everybody is taken on my bad habit. Yes, everyone is taking on my bad habit of being late for these shows, and it looks like Tim and Matt But I'm sure that they are ready to fire up here very soon. And my apologies to whoever has gifted some memberships. I apologize. Let me get to those because I saw 2 of those come down. Moose. Sorry, everyone. I didn't think about your eardrums when I did that. I just wanted to do that. Moose, thank you so much for this. This guy impresses me in particular. Moose, Mike Fort, other Michigan fans, of course, John Diadamo here with our team. And Antoine's a Michigan fan and others. But especially Moose here in particular comes to mind. I take my shots at Michigan. I try not to do it. And I believe I succeed 99% of the time, not in any kind of petty way or biased way. But if I'm just spitting facts and we're laying it out there, and the facts I'm going to spit right now would be 3-time Big Ten champion and national champion and 40-3 the past 3 years. Michigan, right this second, you can make an argument, is the best program in college football. Now, I and others would tend to give that to Georgia right now, but Georgia is not the champion. They were a 2-time champion before that. They still have their head coach, still have their arsenal in play, and the recruiting is through the roof. But how low is Michigan? It's hard to argue. And again, there's always the variable of a new head coach and trying to weigh what that all means until we see it actually play out. But this head coach, Sharon Moore, coached the 3 biggest games of the season, regular season last year, and came through. So there's more certainty there than there is with other first-year head coaches. And I believe that the continuity that Michigan has established with its approach to hiring coaching replacements on the staff and that interconnectedness of what it means to be a Michigan coach, I think that they have very much had an intentional plan for how they're replacing coaches. So right now, I would rate Michigan to have the second best program in college football. And again, they have every right and every argument to say they are the best program in college football. So there's a difference there. There's a difference. If you follow me there, it's like when I had the conversation with Keith, who called last night, when he said that Mark, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Michigan are what sports writers, any great sports writer says, that's the only 3 that you can argue is the greatest program in college football. Well, my response was, those guys are morons. So I'm not arguing that they should not be considered the 3 greatest in some order, or one of them the greatest. That's not what I'm arguing. I'm arguing that it's ridiculous to say that there are not other programs. I can think of 2 in particular, that 3 in particular, that should not be included in that argument. And I will argue that with anyone. So the way we debate and discuss and argue college football here, the Voice of College Football, you have to hear the nuances within the discussion, because I get called out on the carpet daily for things I did not say. People weren't listening. They didn't get it. Happens every day where I have to tell somebody, or I just ignore it and I just keep going because I don't have time to respond to every comment, unfortunately. Well, actually, it's fortunately, and it needs to be more fortunately, that I can't respond to every comment, because we need to be having more views and comments that I can't respond to, because that's more about you guys commenting to each other as well. But yeah, that people don't necessarily listen. And I get that. I watch a lot of videos that I'm not in the sports realm, but in other realms where I'm doing 4 things at the same time. So I'm not listening to, but I'm also not getting on and commenting in a slanderous way. Man, I could have, if there wasn't some kind of fair, fair practice or negligence clause involved, somebody like myself could file suits left and right every day on slanderous charges. People slandering. All right, so we'll stick with Moose here. Moose, thank you so much for that. So Moose, a Michigan fan, largest fan base here at the Voice of College Football, I do believe. And and this is really not for this audience, but I'll say it anyway, that I do think that we have somewhat been hurt here at the Voice of College Football with little too much Ohio State, Michigan. I think we used to really drive some serious SEC numbers here, and we no longer do that. And I think that's been an issue. But regardless, Moose, thank you so much for all that you do. He has gifted a membership. And so what's going to happen here is somebody gets that membership. And so they get the emojis, the perks, the per month request of special content, the Discord link. So I'm going to put that all available to anybody that is a YouTube channel member. So maybe you've got a YouTube channel membership here on the main channel, but you don't know what your Discord link is. You can't get into Discord. I'm going to send out an email right when we get done that's going to have the Discord link and all the other benefits to being a member here at the Voice of College Football. And our guy Jackson, who does such a tremendous job promoting us here at the Voice of College Football, yes, he is gifted a membership as well. So I can in no way thank Moose and Jackson and all of you enough for your generosity. And so thank you so much for gifting the membership there to the Voice of College Football. We do have a Patreon, but the Patreon started far before the YouTube membership. So just know that it's an either or proposition. You don't have to get both to get anything that you wouldn't have received elsewhere on the other. But it's just something we didn't want to shut down the Patreon to start everything over here. So, and I know the cost is slightly different. I can't do anything about that. I've tried to change it and tried to make them exact. So they're not exact, but they're within $1 or something. So thank you so much for all that you do here for us here at the Voice of College Football. And with that, we will see you soon. Lock in on the videos. And yeah, our next scheduled show, I believe, is Monday with Matthew Miller, Texas Live. But I'm sure I'll pop up before that to talk some more college football. And it's about that time. June's about that time where I really dig into numbers and rosters and personnel to deliver some serious breakdowns on the upcoming season. So we will get there with all of you. 2024 is coming. And we will see you next time right here at the Voice of College Football. Most of us are on the internet pretty much all the time. It's fun. You get to socialize. You get entertained. And in this day and age, it's pretty much necessary. And even if you're one of those people that's not on the internet all the time, you know what is? Your personal information. And there are people out there trying to hack you all the time. They want your email address. They want your phone number. They want your place of employment. And they want to do bad things with it. There's also fairly legitimate corporations and companies that want your information. They want it for marketing purposes. They're going to buy it. They're going to sell it. They're going to trade it. At the very least, it's annoying to you. It's a nuisance. It's aggravating. Your email gets cluttered up with spam email. You get robocalls all the time. That's at the very least. At the worst, it's a threat to your family, to your friends, to your personal information, to your banking, to your finances, to your security, to your safety, to your identity. It can be pretty serious. This video is sponsored by Aura. I got hacked and it was pretty obvious. This was about 8 or 9 months ago, and there were red flags all over the place. And I didn't exactly know what to do, but I knew I needed to do something quickly. I mean quickly. I researched 8, 10, or 12 companies immediately. I went all over the place. I asked people. I was online looking for the best company that could serve my needs and secure my information. You know who I found? Aura. And I'm glad I did. It was amazing. I contacted them. They got right back to me immediately. Their customer support is phenomenal. Their customer service is first-rate, friendly. They are detailed. They know what they're doing, and they do it right, and they will protect you. In addition to everything I just mentioned, they've got a password-keeping service. They keep your credit score. They notify you anytime there's a possible data breach. This has happened to me a number of times. I'm getting notifications all the time when there's a possible compromise to my credit score or anything that I don't want. They've got a VPN that will allow you to browse the internet anonymously. It's amazing. And again, customer service support available 24/7. Click the link in the description section below and get 2 free weeks of Aura. Protect your finances, protect your information, protect your privacy, protect your identity. I did, and I'm glad I did. Aura, thank you so much for what you've done for me. And now,